All right, you kind of had an opportunity to absorb or think. Any questions about reading from a file? All right, the next we want to write to a file. This is great for if you're writing games for fun. You want to keep high scores. You want to keep high scores for individual people. You want to read in those high scores, and then you also want to spit them back out again if there's new ones. So you want to write to a file, or as we saw, we've got text coming in here. If I want to modify it and save it, I should be able to write to a file. When we write to a file, instead of a stream reader, we use a Streamwriter. It's a different class, has different methods, it does different things. Right, so the first thing we'll need is a Streamwriter. That's going to happen in my Save button now. So inside my Save button, I'm going to declare a Streamwriter. That class is available to me because I did the using System.io. So that class is available, and again, I usually put an out on this to remind me that this is an out pointer. It's for output purposes because pointers can only be for out or in, they can't mix. And let's just call it out file for right now. And when we write, it's pretty much the same thing. Create a pointer, open the file so we can put new stuff in it, do the processing, put stuff in it, and then close it. So it's very similar to reading, except instead of bringing stuff in, we're going to be sending stuff out. When we open it, instead of open text, we're now going to, there's two options here that you might use depending on your circumstances. One is create text. The other is append text. If you open the file for create text, the file is basically erased. Not basically, it is erased. And whatever you put in it goes into the file. But if there's anything in there already, like in ours here, it will erase it and then overwrite it. There won't be any, it's not like we write a couple, anything is left over still there. That doesn't happen. We wipe out the file and fill it with new stuff. Sounds scary, but it's the one we typically do the most. There's also an append text that says open the file and automatically move the pointer. Remember that file pointer? Move it all the way to the end of the file, and when I start putting stuff in, append it, tack it on to the end. Depends on your circumstances. If I'm doing high scores, I want the old high scores to go away and the new one to replace it. If I'm keeping a historical list of people who are delinquent and they're paying their bills, then I might want to tack it on to the end, say here's a new one for this month, here's a new one for this month, if it's a historical list instead of the current list. I don't use append much, but there are some circumstances where it kind of comes in handy.
Is there any way to add it to the beginning of the file so that when you read it, the more
Move it down?
Well, append to the beginning, so when you're reading the more recent stuff.
Right. No, not without processing. All right, so what I would do in that case is put the new stuff in and then write all the old stuff that I had from before and replace what was there before. No. You have to write at the end of the file. What this one does is wipes everything out, so the end is basically the beginning. It's an empty file. What this one does is put you at the end so that you can write. There are, I think they're not called random, what are they called? Sorry, I can't come up with a term. There is a way to create a file where you can jump around inside it and read, but not write. Okay, so what we have to figure out when we open it is, do we want to wipe out what's in there, or do we want to tack on to the end? Most of the time the answer is wipe out what's in there. Most of the time. It is very difficult. It's impossible. You know, when I ran this, please. it would be really cool if we could go into that file and take out 2 lines that I accidentally deleted and then put in Volker did this with an indentation of 10 characters and leave everything else alone. Can't do it. But the good news is we sucked in the entire file, put it in our text box. So now when we're ready to save, we just take the entire contents of the text box and put it back out to the file and wipe out what was there before. We replace the original. When you use Microsoft Word, what does it do when you open the file and you hit save? Does it just save your changes, or does it just wipe out what was out there and replace it with the new one? It overwrites it. Now, really, they tried this. It failed miserably. They tried to have a historical list of changes to your file. It's horrendous. Didn't work at all. Slowed Word down terribly. So now they bring in your entire file, you make changes and you hit save, they replace the old one with the new one. They thought it would be smaller to keep track of your changes. Didn't work out. So we're basically doing the same thing that Microsoft Office products do, that just about every product does. When I bring in a picture into paint.net and I change the color of the eyes from blue to green and save it, do they just change the eyes in the original? No. Just take the old picture, replace it with a new. That's kind of what we're doing here. Before you can do that, you have to bring the old in so that you can manipulate it. Okay, so we are going to create text. Where the file is or where it should be created, we can designate the complete path again, or we can just use the file in the bin folder. Now, a couple other things to recognize about both create and append. If the file exists, we replace it. But what if it doesn't exist? When you're writing text, when you're writing to a file, if the file doesn't exist, it creates it automatically. That's how create text works. So, and this is a very common mistake. You put it if file exists in your write module. If it doesn't exist, what do? You use create text to create it. It's going to do that anyway. So you don't have to ask if the file exists when you're writing. Well, that's for some reason you really need to know. But you don't have to, because if it doesn't exist and you say create text, it creates it. When you say append text, if the file exists, add to the end of it. If it doesn't exist, create it. So that's an easy way to create files using Visual Studio. You just do a file open, give it the name, and if it's not there, it's poof, it's there. It gets added automatically. So we've decided, or I've hinted to you, that we want to create text to open the file. So we're going to open file again, but this time for writing. This is another reason to close it, because now I'm going to write to the same file. If it's still open from my read process, I won't be able to do it. So we want to use our pointer, out file equals file dot create text. Which file? Same file name. Unlike reading, we often write an entire file at once. It is not real simple for us to go into that text box and pull out one line at a time. It can be done. It's just complicated, more complicated than we need. So when it's time to write that file, we're not going to use a loop. We're just going to say, take what's in the text box, write it all to the file all at once. Just like reading, there are two write commands. One writes an entire line. The other writes your text. A line with a carriage return automatically inserts the carriage return into the file when you do write line. You do not have to put carriage returns in there. So let's experiment with that a little bit before we solve our problem of copying our file back out there. Sorry, I'm going to change gears here. Let's change the name of the file to roster2. That file doesn't exist. I won't be able to read it. I'm not going to try. I'm going to go right to save. Let's experiment. Let's write your first and last name, one string, to the file as a line. So I want to go out file.writeLine. And then just say your first and last name, or if you want, use mine, I don't care. Whoops, I forgot something. What did I forget to do? Say it. Good. Close an output file just like you close an input file. Exactly the same, just different pointer name. Now let's temporarily try this. Outfile.writeLine. No, right, excuse me. I want to demonstrate the difference. Mid-state. That's it. Sorry. And then finally, notice that two of these are rights. The difference is where the pointer ends up when you're done. If you do a write line, it writes the text into the file and automatically inserts a carriage return into the file and puts the pointer back down on the next line. Automatically. If you do a write, it writes mid-state and leaves the pointer right there. So the next thing you write just gets tacked down right to the end. Notice the spaces I put in there for spacing. And then after college, I said, wherever you are, write line, new line. The line here basically means new line, when you're done, at the end. So what I expect to get here in my file is Volker Gall, Mid-State Technical College, second line, third line, software development. Understand the difference between write and write line. I can't tell you that one's used more than the other here. Depends on what you're doing. Let's test it. I can't open because I changed my file name. I can try, but it'll tell me you can't find your file. So that proves to me that the file does not exist. Trying to open it also does not create it either. Just told me it's not there. So now I'm going to hit save. What did that just do? Created the file and put Volker Gall, Mid-State Technical College software developer in it, right? Because that's what I said. When I hit save, create it, because it doesn't exist, put this stuff in it, close it. I should now be able to open it because it exists and it's got stuff in it. Sure enough. If I really want to prove it, this is a waste of time because I just proved it by opening it. What if that isn't the way I want it to look? Then change your program so it looks the way you want it to. You want it double spaced, put extra blank lines in between. How do you do that? How do you generate a blank line?
Did you put the empty string in?
I don't know that you even need that. Good idea though. Oh, shut up. Right line, nothing. You could put the empty string in there. Have exactly the same effect, but this is shorter, right? 2 characters. Big deal.
Same deal.
But that does the same thing. It says write whatever's in the parentheses, there's nothing, and then go to the next line. If I run my program again, now what happens when I say save? It creates that file, but it already exists. So it replaces it with my new version, double space. Can I open it right now? Sure, it exists. The point there is if the file doesn't exist, this actually creates a file in Windows. And if you don't tell it where to put it, it puts it in the same folder with your executable. All right, now that's all well and good. Don't forget this command comments out those lines of code right in my toolbar. Those are great for demonstration purposes. But what I really want to do is take what's in the text box and stuff it out to the file. Right or right line? Doesn't really matter. If I say right, it'll take that entire pile of text that's in that text box and write it out and leave the pointer right there. So if I wanted to, I could put more onto it, technically. If I say right line, it takes the contents of that text box, puts it in the file, and moves down to the next line. In this case, since I'm writing the entire contents of a file, shouldn't make a difference. So I'll go with right line. And then I just want to take the contents of my text box and write it. But what about carriage returns? They're already embedded in my text box, right? Otherwise, I wouldn't see all those blank lines. And remember how it looked when we first saw it? It was semi-smushed, except there were so many blank lines that we didn't see the smush quite so much. Oops. I now want to go back to roster. We inserted an RN here, right? /R/N. That's a carriage return. We inserted it there. What you're looking at on the screen here is one big, huge monster string that has embedded in it a bunch of carriage returns. When we take that one huge monster string with its carriage returns embedded in it and send it out to a file, the carriage returns go with it. Now I'm going to hit save. It's going to take this big, huge pile of text, send it to the file using create text, which says replace what's out there with this. Done. Wait a minute. How do I know if that worked? I could open it again, all right? But how do I know that it's actually replacing what's on the screen here? Here's something we could try. What if I do a Control A? No, that didn't work. Well, Command A. Nope, that didn't work. Try and highlight all this stuff. That's a whole lot. That's not working very well. Why doesn't Control A work? That's a good question. I really don't know. This text box doesn't recognize Control A. So here's another way to test it. I could just go open it or just run it again. Right? Is that what you said?
I'll select all.
Not on the menu. You could write your own. He suggested select all, but what menu? I mean, that's a different menu. Okay. But it just came in and done by Volker is in the middle of this thing. When you use the read line command, read line, right? You use the read line command, it reads one character at a time. This is how I picture it. It reads one character at a time. As soon as it hits a carriage return, it quits. It throws the carriage return away and it gives you the string that it read. That's what I envision. That's how read line works. Read characters, when you hit the R or the L in Gall, quit. No, when you hit the carriage return after the L, quit. Volker Gall gets sent to the program as a string. No carriage return embedded in there. The carriage return is discarded when you do a read line. Got to know that. That's the definition. If there's the carriage return that was in the file is discarded. Most of the time that's fine. If I'm reading this, when I read my program to do my attendance, I don't spit it back out on the screen in its ugly, unformatted way. I just read it, process it, send it to the database, and then go on to the next line. I don't need the carriage return. In this example, because we're displaying it, we want the carriage returns, but we have to put them back in ourselves if we want them that way. Let's go back. I just had a semi-genius idea here. Let's go back to roster 2. File should still be there. That's what you get for being on this side of the room. I now have a roster, right? What if I want to put those in a combo box so I can pick from them? Whoa, cool. Happens all the time. So now when I say open, I'll display them in the text box. We'll just leave that there. But in addition to all the rest of this stuff, how do I put them in a combo box? Well, first I got to create a combo box. I'll just park it down here for lack of a better place. And we're just demonstrating, so I'm not even going to put a label on it, but I will just give it a quick name. Now what do? Exactly the same thing as when we were reading before. Open the file. If it exists. If it doesn't exist, there's nothing in my combo box. If the file exists, open it. Keep reading until you get to the end. How many names are in there? I put 5. We don't know. Keep reading until you get to the end. Read one of them in. Here we said tack it on to the end of results. In addition to that, we could say CMB names dot, anybody remember?
Add
Close, items dot add. The fact that you got that far is great. And then you type that in there, it doesn't work. You go back to unit 6. How do I do that? Oh, add, I got you. What do we want to add? One line. No carriage return? Remember, every time we add, it adds a new line in that combo box. I don't need a carriage return there. If there were one, but I don't think I can put carriage returns in a combo box. You can put them in, it just ignores them. Looks like there's a carriage return at the end of the file. Where'd that come from? Probably when I wrote it, I did a right line instead of a right. So I got an extra blank one in there, don't I? You can come up here. Oh, there it is. A couple of ways to fix it. I think my first instinct is to say, okay, when you write that out to a file, don't put any extra carriage returns at the end, just make it a right. Extra junk. No more extra junk. Save it. No more extra items. It's the kind of things you end up fighting with as a software developer. Where'd that blank line at the bottom of my combo box come from? Must have read an extra line, right? Nope. When I saved it, I wrote to Carriage Return that I didn't need. But now I have a combo box and I can pick, and I could make this a suggest append combo box. I can sort it, right? So that whatever the name order is in the combo box, in the text file, they come up sorted in my combo box. Kinds of cool stuff you could do with these text files. That's often what happens. Simple little text files. Questions about writing? Don't have to write string literals. You can write variables. We did that. Or you could. Right? Here I write the first name, then I write a space, then I write line the last name. Just last class in RDD we were talking about don't have these multi-part fields. First name, last name together. Well, I don't. Here I have two variables, first name, last name. Now I want to stick them back together again for the user to see. Well, I have to put the space in there. Matt?
Does it have to be a .txt file, or can it be something else?
The extension doesn't make any
Oh,
difference.
it doesn't? Okay.
No. All right. Typically, so that we don't get confused, if it's a text file, we put txt or text as the extension.
Okay.
But if you put the docx on the end, Word will try to read it. Windows, when you double click it, Windows said, oh, docx, that means it's a Word file. It'll try to open it in Word.
Oh, okay.
And it'll fail miserably.
Mhm.
Okay. Or maybe it'll work because it's just text, but I think it'll fail because it's missing all this extra junk that Word puts in there.
If you,
That extension, here's a little trivia for you, doesn't mean anything except for Windows to anticipate which program to open it with. That's all. So I can put docx on the end of my text file, and I can run my program, and it'll work just peachy. But if I go try to read some other docx file that really is a Word document, you should try that once. You get hieroglyphics, just these weird characters in there that you just can hardly even read, because Word has got binary code in there to help describe the document as well. So the extension is just used by Windows to figure out which program to use to launch when you double click on the file. So when you open your resume.docx, you double click it, it's Windows says docx, that means Word, so it tries to open it in Word. You can put whatever extension you want on there. You want to mess up with your friend, you want to mess with your friends for a while, or you want to hide documents so people can't read them, put the wrong extension on. You can still go into Microsoft Word and say, please open mypasswords.xlsx, and Word will go, all right, they got the wrong extension, but that's okay, sucks it in, works just fine. But if you try to open it in Excel, it goes, I don't know what the heck this is. Doesn't look like an Excel document to me. That's all those extensions are for. Go ahead.
won't Word read .txt files?
Sure. If it knows it's a TXT file, then it expects it to be text, and it reads text. But if you say that this is a text file and it's got Word junk in it, then it gets confused. It's amazing. If you put docx on the end and it's really a text file, Word won't be able to read it. It can only read it if it's got the right, it's a little goofy. So no, you can put your own extensions. You could put your MD for Matt Daniak extension on there. Say this is one of my files. Doesn't matter. PHP file, HTML files, XML files. Those are all pure text. You can read them with this exact same code. They're pure text. I think things get weird is when you get into Microsoft Office formatted files. Image files are a bunch of bits. Can't read those very well into a text file either. How do you make an image into text? Doesn't work. Don't forget to close the file. Here it's even more important, and I've proven this, I can't prove it here. It's more important that you close a file that you open for reading or for writing Again, if you try to read it later, you'll fail if you don't close it. But what also happens when you're writing files, when your program says write, let's say you're writing one line at a time. If I want to write what's in my combo box back out to the file, there's no quick way to do that. Right? I have to get the first one, write it, get the next one, write it. If you're writing one line at a time, Windows intercepts it and puts it in something called a buffer. Because Windows is busy doing all kinds of things like updating the clock and maybe updating your antivirus signatures, and maybe while you're running this program you're downloading a file and you're playing a video, and all this is happening at the same time, and Windows is multitasking, right? Sort of. It's just going from one to the other to the other to the other. And so to make your program seem faster, when you say write, it says, okay, I'm done. Didn't really put it in the file. Because file processing is slow. Imagine way back when we used floppy disks and they spun about this fast. You'd write to them and it'd take a second and go, okay, I got it. What Windows has done since then, because even today, hard drives compared to RAM, very slow. USB external drives, very slow compared to RAM. What Windows does is it puts your text that you say write it to the file, it puts it in this buffer, which is just a piece of memory. RAM. Done. And then you say write some more. Tax it on the end. Done. Still hasn't made it into the file. When the buffer gets full, Windows has a specific size for that buffer. Let's pretend it's 2K, 2,000 bytes. When the buffer gets full, then Windows goes, actually writes it to the disk once, because disk writing is slow. It writes it to the disk once and then starts filling your buffer again. Whenever the buffer's full, it writes it. And it does that in the background so you don't even see it. Unless it receives the close command, then it immediately empties the buffer whether it's full or not. I've proven this. I wrote 1,000 lines to the file and forgot to close it. Forgot. Test. Write. When I get to the end, there's 997 lines in that file. Not 1,000. Because the others were in the buffer. And if you don't issue the close command, the buffer never gets empty. I exited the program. Windows says, I guess you don't need this anymore. Pitched it and never writes it. Never writes it. You can lose data to the buffer. Easy solution, always close your files. If you get in the habit of opening it and immediately writing the close command, you shouldn't have an issue. If you don't completely understand this, I'm not worried about it. Windows takes care of it. As long as you close the file, you'll never have a problem. So close it. Cool. I'm gonna make sure you get stuff to do this weekend. Been in this class a whole week with no homework. What the heck? What are you getting paid for? What are you paying me money for except to give you homework? All right, so let's go back to my page, programming logic. Let's take a look at the first assignment. And not only this weekend, but we've got an hour of lab coming. I want you to have something to do, and there's no worksheets to keep you occupied. Modify your assignment tracker program to save the assignments to a text file. Now there's a twist here. Save the assignments due and the completed assignments to a text file. Okay, that's not so bad.
The same text file?
The same text file. I don't want two of them. Could. Interesting solution, but no. Same text file. Luke's brain's already spinning. Wait a minute, how am I going to do that? Writing them isn't so bad. When you bring them back in again, they got to go in the right boxes. Don't speak out loud. Let everybody struggle with this one for a while. when you write this, when you play with it next hour, the first thing you should do is, the first thing you're going to have to figure out how to do is how do you take the contents of a list box, because that's where your assignments are, right? They're in a list box. How do you take a list box and spit those out to a file? Problem number one. If I were you, I would just say take the assignments that are due and write those to a file. Let's see if we can get that to happen. Then when that works, let's add the completed assignments to that file. Done. Because whatever technique you use to write the due assignments, you just use the same thing to write the done assignments, the same logic. Giving you too many hints here, but that's all right. Once you get it to write, and you can look inside this text file, and you can open it in Notepad and go, hey, look, there's my assignments. Cool. Time to celebrate, right? Graffiti's just out the door over here. It's time to celebrate. But now comes the next challenge. I got to bring them back in again. I already cheated and gave you a clue for how to get them into the list boxes. It's the same as a combo box. Just add them, add them, add them, add them, add them. But you got to get them in the right one. Don't say anything. You think you got a solution? Good. Give you something to do next hour. Try it. There are dozens, I've seen dozens of solutions for how to deal with telling them apart. So you have something to do, because that's not the whole program, by the way, but that's a nice start. I think there's other things here. First of all, this you could do right now. Convert that combo box that has the dates in it into a date picker again. Let the user pick it from a date picker instead of a combo box. Right now, I wanted you to experience loops, so I had you write a loop that fills a combo box with dates. Get rid of that code and give me a date picker instead. Shouldn't change much. Don't worry about this write a class just yet. We haven't talked about that. Write a mechanism that allows the user to load an existing file into those list boxes. My advice is do this first. Because your program already, and if you use mine, it just needs some tweaking, your program already takes what they enter for the assignment and the class and the due date, puts it in the list box. Puts it in the list box, puts it in the list box. Put a few of those in there. And then write them out to a text file. Get it to write first. Then bring it back in again. You can handle it. You have the tools. You got to find the right ones and throw the logic at this, but you have the tools to do that. Any number of assignments due, any number of assignments complete, including none. Another little twist. I'm not assigning this. I'm giving you the opportunity to get a head start on it so that you can get, before this stuff gets stale in your brain, start using the reading and writing thing. Luke?
I don't know if you already said this, but can you use yours that you have on OneDrive?
On OneDrive, there's an assignment tracker up there.
Yeah.
So if you didn't finish yours, don't worry about it. You can use mine. Mine should be very similar to what yours was. If you can use mine even if you did finish yours. I don't care. Mine's not real pretty. If yours is prettier and you want to use yours, that's fine. So that's not an assignment. But you have the skills to get started on it. I think I mentioned in this class that someday I'm going to give you a due date. When are you going to work on this? My advice is start working on it today, at least for the second hour or the last hour of class, maybe a little bit this weekend before the big important football game. But someday I'm going to assign this and give you all of a week or so to do it. And go, that's a lot, I can't do it all. No, don't. Pieces. Add more to it. Before I forget, there's one feature of my program that I don't like right now. Any questions about what I'm recommending you get started on here? Okay. There's something I don't like. When I guess I could have kept that running. When I hit save, it does it, right? What feedback did I get? None in this program. In Microsoft Word, that was my biggest complaint about Word. You hit save and it doesn't tell you I did it. Gives you no visual clue whatsoever that it worked. In the latest versions of Word, if you look very carefully on the title bar, you can see some changes to say that it's saved. It's still stupid. Most programs, the save button will gray out if there's nothing to save. Now, we don't have any buttons here, so that's not going to work. So we should give the user some kind of feedback saying, hey, I'm done. I did it. Message box. There's my title. Now my buttons, again, all they can say is okay. And in this case, it's not an error, right? So I'll use information. I'm going to split this line so that you can see it. While you're copying that, for those of you that are, I'm going to run it, make sure it works. By the way, what happens if I hit save and there's nothing in the text box? Wipes out my text box. It wipes out my file contents and gives me an empty file. Oh. It's not an idiot-proof program yet. That's Unit 2. My save box probably ought to just be, my button ought to be disabled or something until the user actually adds something to this, then the save box lights up. You'll learn how to do that later. Now, that's cumbersome because now I got this message box that I got to get out of the way. Unit 4, I will show you a technique where it just puts a message on the screen down here. So you could use a label, right? I'll show you in, I think it's Unit 4 or 5, somewhere around there, I forget, how to put a message on the screen. And then 5-10 seconds later, using a timer, you already know how, take it away. File saved, 2, 3, 4, 5, boop, goes away. But for right now, I got feedback that my save worked, or at least the program ran. I'm going to pause the recording here for a second. Good, so now all those clues I gave you for the assignment tracker of when does it change, I hope you remember them because I didn't record it. But what I'm doing here is asking the user, and there's a purpose to this madness, asking the user if they really want to exit, I'm in button exit, if they really want to exit without saving. And I'm showing them yes, no buttons. So let's just demonstrate that real quick. I'm not going to do anything with it yet. Oops. There it is, question mark, exit, yes, no buttons. It's not just an okay button, it's yes, no buttons. But notice what else I did with my message box command. I didn't just say message box. The message box show function has the ability to send back to you which button the user clicked. So far, we've ignored it because there's only one button, so we don't have to ask. So far, there's only been an OK button, so we never really cared. And it's legal to ignore the results, the answer. We have been. But in this case, I want to know which one did they pick. If the answer is equal to, double equal, Dialog result dot no. Did they click the no button? There's also a dialog box. Yes, if I wanted to ask that question. In this case, if they say no, I don't want to exit. I want to stay. According to my notes, is it e.cancel? Yep. Remember that? We were doing it with validation. We can do it here. e.cancel equals true. Is it E? Yep, there's E. Why is it complaining? Uh-oh, my notes are wrong. This event, oh, I know why. This is button exit. I'm going to reverse my logic. If the answer is yes, close. I hope you're not following because I'm making mistakes. Does this make sense? Are you sure you want to exit? And if they say yes, then get out. What happens if they say no? It never hits the close and we never get out. Prove it. Nothing happens. We just stay. If I hit yes, then I hit the close. Now, I mentioned that there's a reason to this madness, besides this technique, right? I don't think you've seen that. Have you seen that before? I don't think so. I'm dreaming of another class. But now watch what happens. Uh-oh. What do you think is going to happen? Button exit? That's not button exit. It didn't ask. Wouldn't that be nice if Microsoft Word, whenever you click the X, just goes and doesn't ask? No, that would not be nice. Here's another one. What was that? Some of you are too young. Back in the day, I want to say Windows 98, Windows 3.1, if you wanted to close a program, you can double click this icon and it will close it. I still use that a lot. If my mouse pointer's over here, instead of going all the way over there to find I just double click over here. Here's another one. That didn't work. What was that? Alt F4 closes the window. Where's my question? Didn't show up.
I don't know if this is, I used that trick back in 2007, I think it was.
Yeah, that was a long time ago for you. That was yesterday for me, but go ahead.
Well, I'm just not sure. You said that trick only worked back in.
Oh no, that's when it started.
Oh,
It's
that's
still
when it
here.
started.
This is Windows 8.1. It's still here. So you can still use it. Even if there's no icon up there, you can still double click in the upper left. In most programs, the program will close. But I want this to execute even if I click on the X, even if I do Alt F4, even if I use that hidden super secret shortcut. How do I do that? I don't use button exit. I use a different method. The method I want to use is related to the form. So I'm going back over here. I'm going to select my entire form. I'm going to go to the events. Sorry for those of you in cheap seats, I can't make this bigger. There is a way to screen zoom, but the events button, I want to use form closing. Check your notes, Volker, double check. Is that what it says?
Yeah, right
Okay.
on the bottom there.
Right on the bottom.
Up 2 lines or 3.
There, form closing. Okay. So here's form closing, double click. Creates a new event. Remember form load? Happens automatically when you're, this happens automatically on the way out. On the way out. But before you're done, before it shuts everything down, this is kind of like a validating event for the form, sort of. So this event will occur regardless of whether I hit the X, button exit, or whatever. So all my code that I have here, all of that, where did it go? Here. Goes down below. So if you want to catch the X and any other way the user can dream of to kill this program, short of the task manager, if you just kill it with the task manager, this doesn't happen anymore. Still need my dialog answer. Are you sure you want to exit? I'm now reversing my logic again. Because this is where the cancel comes in. Form closing has an e.cancel equals true. Please, thank you. On the way out, ask the user, you sure? If they say, no, I'm not sure, I want to leave, cancel the exit. Aha! Alt F4. Double click. What about button exit? It says form close. Has a side effect, causes the closing event. And in this case, because of the cancel, I can cancel and stay even though I clicked on button exit. So that one technique, moving all of your exit logic to form closing, allows you to handle exit buttons, this X, that thing, Alt F4, and the form.close command, intercept them all and do some processing if you wish. That's very common. So I'll leave that in here so you can borrow it, because your assignment tracker program says it needs to sense that the assignments have changed and warn the user if they have not saved. Your program needs to be smart enough that if it hasn't changed, you don't ask. You just go. It's the pig song. You recognize it? It's catchy. All right. Enough. Your brains are full. I will save this. I recommend you use the next hour, if you can, to work a little bit on your assignment tracker. If your brain's too dead and you can't, put yourself a little note in your planner saying, when are you going to do it? Before this gets too stale.